Give me my theme music!
What's up, Buffs Nation, and welcome into Buffs News Weekly Live. I'm your host, Russ, and welcome to this Monday afternoon show. Appreciate you guys for joining me. If you're joining me live right now in the chat, let me know. If not, if you're watching this later on, of course, comment down below. Let me know that you're catching the show later on. And of course, while you guys are here, make sure to hit that like button. Be subscribed to the channel. If you're over on Twitter, hey, why don't you jump on over, join us on YouTube, comment in the chat. We can have a great conversation. And again, that's the best way to support this channel, support everything that I do. So absolutely appreciate it. Let's jump into the chat, say hello to everybody today. What's up, Turbo? Appreciate you dropping by. Ron, appreciate you. Unspoken, as always. What's good with you? Robert Mathis, appreciate you dropping by as always. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. We're going to talk about a number of different things going on. Of course, the main topic of the show is we are going to discuss the preview of the non-conference part of the Buff schedule. I've been doing some research, some background information, going to give you all of the information that I have out there in regards to our first four opponents, talk about what those games are going to mean for the Buffs, and I'm going to let you know my early prediction. It won't be my final prediction. We'll do that the week before the season starts, and that'll also be part of our live radio show that we will have. We can go over that once that day comes, which, by the way, will be August 18th. So make sure you have your calendars marked so you join the first ever live Buffs radio show on YouTube. So make sure you don't miss that. Appreciate you again, you guys dropping by. I'm feeling like Colorado getting slept on. We're going to beat Georgia Tech. Here's the thing. I don't know if Georgia Tech is going to be the team I am most worried about in the first four games. Little tease for later, Ron. Welcome in, Timothy. Appreciate you dropping by. Eric, as always, thank you so much. Put a lot of work into it. We've done a lot of updates, brand new camera, so hopefully we're getting better quality. I'm going to be doing some pre-recorded videos more often during the season, which will give you an even higher quality as well. I'll be bringing this camera along with me when I go to any of the Buffs games this year, maybe doing some fan interviews or other things that I can do from inside the stadium. So lots of stuff coming up. Appreciate you guys so much because your support has helped me to be able to do all this. As I said, all the support on this channel goes right back into the channel. Not living off this or anything like that. So everything that you guys do to support, liking the videos, being subscribed, watching my content, interacting, if you're a member of the channel, if you give any super chats, this is what happens is I update the studio, the production value, going to put it all back in to make things that much better for you guys. So appreciate you guys again so much for allowing me to do this. Thank you. Appreciate it, Ron. Keith, what's up, my dog? How's it hanging today? Appreciate you dropping by as always. We're a week out from the start of fall camp. I know, that's why I wanted to get into this. This week is going to be all about previewing the season before we get into the season, okay? So today's show, we're going to be talking about the non-conference. We're going to do another show on Wednesday where we're going to talk about the first half of the conference schedule. And then on Friday, we're going to look at the back half of the conference schedule leading into fall camp, where, of course, next week I'll be covering everything that comes out from live during camp, trying to find out. And I know we're going to eventually hear because he has said he will be telling everybody, but hopefully we get to hear more about what happened with Coach Prime, how he's doing, what's going on going into the season, all of that. So that's something to keep an eye on as that happens. OFB, welcome in. Appreciate you dropping by. Good evening, Lady C, as always. What's up with Memphis? I'll be talking about that here in just a moment. That's our Big 12 update on the schedule. Great new everything. Russ looks good. Appreciate you. So yes, let's talk about the first bit of news today, which of course was the news early on today that Memphis was submitting an offer of $200 million to join the Big 12. That's right. They're not getting paid to join the Big 12. They want to pay to get into the Big 12. Now, what does this mean? First up, the fact is the news has come out in the last couple of hours that the Big 12 has actually declined their offer even after Memphis increased that offer to $250 million to join the league. The writing is on the wall, everybody. The fact that a team is so willing to pay to get into the conference tells you everything you need to know about what's happening right now in college football. And the fact is that the conferences are consolidating, and the future of college football is super Power 4 conferences. So the Power 4 conferences are going to be the main components going forward. I guarantee it. And this just proves that fact that a team like Memphis would put up so much equity to just join the league and be a part of what's happening tells you everything you need to know. So be on the lookout, because we've seen this already start in motion with the SEC, with the Big Ten, starting to kind of put together the workings of a super conference. And now with the Memphis trying to get into the Big 12 desperately, you have to understand that the writing is 100% on the wall, that is where college football is moving, that the Power 4 will be the future of major college football. So the question is, and I want to ask you guys in the chat, I want you to tell me, because if Memphis is not the right team to join the Big 12, who is? Who is on your wish list to join the Big 12 going forward if we move into super conference territory? Some teams that I can throw out there as potential gets, not necessarily teams that are absolutely being like spoken to in the same sentence, but like wish list items. Okay. The number one is probably one that's not going to happen, but it probably will be a part of the super conference in some way. That would be Notre Dame. That would be a really massive get for whoever gets them. I think they eventually do move away from being independent, especially if we go towards a super conference model. The other teams we want to look at, and I think they're teams that make sense simply because of who Colorado is, and I think it would kind of create a semi or a pseudo feud / rivalry with Colorado and Coach Prime. Of course, that would be the Florida schools, Florida State, Miami, seeing if one of those teams might eventually join one of the Power 4 conferences and be a part of something like that. That's something that could potentially be on the table. Florida State, of course, being the big one. The other team that is always thrown around is going to be Clemson. Any of those schools, from those East Coast conferences trying to find their way into the Power 4. Another team could be Syracuse. That'd be an interesting one to see if that would be a part of a Big 12 move or anything like that. Let me know in the comments who you think would be teams that you would love to see get added to the Power Four Super Conference. And of course, if you're watching this later on, comment down below. Let me know who you think should be in there, and I'll reply to your comments. Imagine rejecting 250 million. That tells you everything you need to know, guys, right there. Welcome in, Northside. Appreciate you as always. Thank you, King John. I appreciate it. Did a lot. Had to work a lot to get this all set up. But absolutely loving the space, loving what it's going to be able to become. And now that I have like a dedicated Buffs studio, it's going to be awesome to see. Some good choices here, Northside. Tulane is a school that keeps getting brought up as well. They're definitely an up-and-comer that could find themselves in the right position where the school is doing enough football-wise to maybe get an invite to that. And Louisville, another great school with a long history of football. OFB coming in with the Mountain West option, Boise State. That would also be a very good option, especially with the geography of the Big 12. I think that would be a great choice for Colorado. Absolutely. Another Boise State from Cam. Love it. Tulane standout seat, 15,000 people. They'd have to upgrade that stadium if they want to be big time. Robert Mathis, also Boise State. I guess you're right. ACC is technically part of that, but you just have to wonder if maybe something happens. Maybe all, because I don't know if all of the ACC teams would be good for a super conference. So maybe they get disbanded and it's like a power three that expands into a super conference. Those are just some of the things I've like been hearing or seeing online when people are talking about those teams. Yeah, Notre Dame's a guaranteed shoe-in to join any super conference that does eventually happen. Boise State needs to get out of the trash. Pac-12, Mountain West. Correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't have to get an invitation from a conference. Who has to get a invitation? Eric, do you mean the teams have to join our conference? Is that what you're talking about? Boise State says statements. That's a good one. USF, Boise State, UNLV, all good options and geographically would make sense to be a part of the Big 12 part of the Super Conference. I don't know about UNLV, though. They've been having some struggles and have been having some money problems, so I don't know if that happens. SMU, yeah, that makes sense. That's a big one. Absolutely. SMU in the Dallas area, yeah, that'd be probably a shoe-in to join the Super Conference if we're being honest. They've got the money. Boise State getting ready to go to the Pac-12 with most of the Mountain West. Yeah, correct, Cam. Somebody else said they're still in the Mountain West. They're going to be eventually merging with the Pac-12 to make a new conference. But the question is, does Boise State actually join, or do they eventually break off and join the quote-unquote Super Conference? USC. As an ASU fan, we are trying to move to the Big Ten, if not the SEC. Our boosters do not want to join the Big 12. Florida State. Gotcha. For some reason, I read that as ASU. You may not have a choice, okay? I'm talking about a super conference. There is not going to be technically, quote unquote, a Big Ten or an SEC, guys. Okay? There is technically just going to be like a super conference with like 4 mini conferences. That's what I'm trying to say is it's really not going to matter just as long as you are part of the super conference. And then what I could see is them geographically conferencing out the teams. So you've got the West Coast. You'll probably get Oregon, USC on this end of the country to join kind of a Big 12. Maybe you call it the Pac-12. Maybe you just call it West, North, South, and East super conferences. So again, I don't know if it's really going to matter joining directly to that just yet. What if the Big 12 absorbs the Big East for a basketball super conference? That's another thing we're going to have to think about as it moves forward. Because the Big 12 as a basketball conference is quite strong. So to be able to absorb the Big East to make a super conference eventually may happen. But I think the football super conference will happen first. ACC ain't going to exist once media contract ends. Yeah, Northside, you're getting it. You're getting why I'm bringing up those teams from the ACC. Sorry, Russ, but doesn't a school have to get an invitation? Well, yes, they do. But that's what we're talking about right now. This is a dark horse right here. If I'm being honest, NDSU does need to go D1. They really do. If a school like Delaware and some of the other schools, Liberty, move up and can show success, I think North Dakota State could absolutely be a very good team in Division One, single A football. And I truly do think, because again, geographically, they don't have a lot of football competition when it comes to Division One schools. So they could be a very big draw being a Division One school once that would happen. Man, Memphis would have been great addition. They have football and basketball, so I'm curious why they were declined. To me, again, that tells me that they've got bigger fish they're after. That's what it really says. Oregon State, we need a West Coast school. That would make sense. Boston College, another one brought up. Memphis is the best G5 option. They have the money and team to compete. Memphis football has been really good the last 10 years, multiple SEC wins and bowls. Washington State, that's another one that's being brought up. Is there any truth to CSU join? No, I don't think. I've never heard anything about that. I don't think they even get a seat at the table, guys. I really don't. I love it. I love the smack talking. Okay, real quick, just a very brief recruiting update for everybody out there as we move on from this topic. AI, of course, the number one player in Colorado, will be committing this weekend. He did put out his top 5, and the top 5, of course, included Colorado. The teams we've got to be worried about that were also part of the top 5 for Tufanua Ianatana, and that is UCLA, North Carolina, Oklahoma, and Washington. I think the main competition for Colorado and his services are going to be both Washington and UCLA. I do not see him going to Oklahoma or North Carolina. To me, I think it's down to those 3 schools, CU, UCLA, and Washington. If you're over on Twitter, hey, go to TI's Twitter account. It is at UMUCAIS. Put a comment on there about CU. Just start blowing it up because, again, CU and Colorado fans outnumber everybody in the country at this point, thanks to Coach Prime. And so anything we could do to just kind of show a little love. You don't have to follow. I'm not a big person to follow recruits until they commit. And especially if you don't commit or decommit, I will unfollow. I'm not going to follow any football players that are not officially tied to Colorado because I'm not going to help them with that until, they become official. And if they want the social media following, they need to come to Colorado. If that's not what they're looking for, that's fine, but they shouldn't be getting the followers as a result. So TI will be committing this weekend. We'll find out where home is, and hopefully, the number one player in the state of Colorado chooses to stay home in Colorado. We'll see what happens, hoping that happens. Feel like Washington got a good grab on him. Yeah, I like I said, it's Washington, UCLA. I think those are the 2 big ones that we're fighting right now. No people have our under 6 and a 5. If the Big 12 gets Notre Dame, that'd be sick. However, I think it would be a task to get through for the Buffs football team every year. I mean, it just makes things better. Prime signed the extension because he knows we suck, and last year is as good as we'll ever get. I don't know about that, Qualo. We might not get him for us to be in the conversation, just showing you we're moving in that direction, but we just got to get them to commit. Agreed, Robert. You're getting it. Okay, the Crash Out fans are just jumping way too far ahead of where Colorado is. We're in these conversations. We're eventually going to, be fine. But, that's what's going on. We won't win 7 games. Is that what you're saying? You don't think we're going to win 7 games? We're not even going to get the over on that? I think we're going to win 7 games. Trust me. Whoever's saying that is an somebody who's not really paying attention. Okay? Because trust me, we're going to look at the schedule over the next couple of weeks. And to say there's not 7 wins on that schedule with this team would be very harsh, because I'm saying at a minimum we're 7. I mean, I would be hitting that over hard on any betting site giving you 6.5. I really, really would. Okay, so let's get into it. I have been taking notes all day, all weekend. We're going to go through my notes. We're going to talk about it. Up first, August 29th, the home opener at Folsom Field, Friday night, under the lights, baby. Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets coming to Boulder. What we have to know about the Yellow Jackets and Georgia Tech. Let's go through. We're going to go through some of the departures, what they brought to Georgia Tech, or what they're losing in that sense. What are some of the key returners or additions that Georgia Tech brought in? What is the coaching / playing style of Georgia Tech? Some headlines to pay attention to across the internet about Georgia Tech and what that might mean to the game against Colorado. And then finally, we're going to look at an outlook of both what Georgia Tech is looking like this year, keys and matchups when it comes to the game against Colorado. And finally, what is the big question Colorado has to answer in order to beat Georgia Tech on the home opener August 29th? So first up, departures and what they brought. So the big one for Georgia Tech, of course, was Eric Singleton Jr., wide receiver who transferred out. He was their top wide receiver on the team last year, All-American as a freshman, by the way. 48 receptions, 714 yards, 6 touchdowns, was the top receiving threat for Georgia Tech. He took his talents elsewhere. However, Georgia Tech did do well in bouncing back from that loss, which we will talk about here as well. Zach Pyron was the backup quarterback who did appear for a little bit during the season for them. 409 yards, 2 touchdowns. Jackson Hawes, their number 1 tight end, who was drafted in the 5th round of the NFL draft, was a key blocker and red zone asset for the Yellow Jackets. Of course, he's now in the NFL. Romelo Height, edge, notorious pass rusher for Georgia Tech, made some a season-defining play in their upset against Miami. He is no longer with the program. And then they lost a number of offensive linemen, tight ends, defensive linemen. The trenches is where Georgia Tech really lost out compared to their team last year. Notably, offensive tackle Corey Robinson, who was an all-ACC honorable mention, and of course, defensive lineman Horace Lockett. Those are kind of the big main key losses for Georgia Tech last year going into this season. But as far as guys they bring in, and I'm going to highlight this, guys, because this is where Georgia Tech's strength really lies. So Georgia Tech brought in Kyle Effort, team leader, or brought him back, I should say, linebacker, starter for the team, 64 tackles. He anchored that rejuvenated run defense, which, by the way, their run defense was ranked 30th nationally last year. So bringing back Kyle Efford, very important. And then EJ Lightsey, a linebacker from Georgia, transferred from the Bulldogs to Georgia Tech, adds a piece of game that's very explosive and has been known for some game-changing plays. They also have some depth in linebacker when it comes to Malvin Jordan and Jackson Hamilton, 2 guys you need to pay attention to. So right now, the key position for Georgia Tech coming into this game is their linebacking core. Okay. Now, what that means is it's going to be especially difficult when it comes to the run game and the screen game, because those linebackers are going to be able to go east and west and really track down players. Now, where Georgia Tech is going to struggle is going to have to do with their trenches. The defensive line and offensive line have both been rebuilt, as well as the secondary for Georgia Tech. So that is going to be something very interesting to pay attention to, especially when it comes to the matchups for Colorado. They also did bring back, though, a couple of offensive linemen. It wasn't a full rebuild similar to what Colorado has. Right guard, Kalen Rutledge, who was an all ACC selection. Left guard, Joe Fusel returns. And then they brought in, like Colorado, transfers to fill out the line in Andrew Rosinski and Malachi Carney, two guys to pay attention to. So a revamped offensive line for Georgia Tech, similar to Colorado's offensive line. And then they also, as we noted a little bit earlier, did bring in some key wide receiver additions. Malik Rutherford returns for Georgia Tech, who was also a good wide receiver for them last year. But the big one, of course, FIU transfer Eric Rivers tallied 1,162 yards and 12 touchdowns for FIU last year. Was one of the top targets in the transfer portal. Ends up replacing Eric Singleton at Georgia Tech. So in my eyes, a 1-for-1 swap. It ends up not being a huge loss for Georgia Tech after losing Eric Singleton. So that's something to pay attention to when it comes to Georgia Tech. And SN brings it up right here. DJ McKinney versus Eric Rivers. That is going to be the absolute matchup of the day to pay attention to, and one that I'm going to be very interested in. Now, a little bit about the coaches for Georgia Tech. Coach Brent Key is in his second full season at Georgia Tech. Okay, so newer coach. He is the architect of an option spread offense, blending both triple option with power run and occasional shotgun concepts. Defensive emphasis is on the tackling fundamentals. Offensive coordinator Buster Faulkner emphasizes misdirection and pre-snap motion. Okay, that is how their offense works. So it is going to be a very difficult battle for Colorado's defense, a very good test in the first game of the season, because it is going to be the type of offenses we are going to see throughout the season at different times. And it's going to be very important to see how Colorado's defensive patience looks. Are they going to be able to combat the option offense? Are they going to be able to do different looks when it comes to the motion game that Georgia Tech is going to put in? As we remember last year, Colorado struggled at times when we played teams that were that more quarterback, running back, running style, along with a lot of options, motion, and misdirection. Okay. All of those things caused headaches. You could look at the Kansas State game for Colorado and what happened defensively there, getting ran over that whole game, or the Kansas game. Both of those games are going to have to shed light on what Colorado needs to do to be successful against Georgia Tech in this matchup. Now, some things to kind of pay attention to, okay? So last year they had a run defense overhaul. They went from allowing 221 yards of rushing every game to 122. So that is a key aspect. And like I said, they brought back their linebacking core and depth this year. So that should be another point that they emphasize this season for the defense. And then, of course, on the offensive side, the offensive line being rebuilt after departures, but retaining those players I talked about. And finally, this is what I was saying. The trenches is where the game is going to be won and lost against Georgia Tech, because last year, Georgia Tech ranked near the bottom of the ACC in sacks, and the edge room, not only was it under scrutiny last year, but they didn't really do much to address it this year. So that is going to be a big emphasis, which means, as bad as this is going to sound for a lot of people out there, because I know we want to have a more balanced attack, the passing game is going to win this game for Colorado. It's not going to be the running game entirely winning this game. If Colorado can get the passing game going and, of course, complement it with some running and, of course, some Caden Salter quarterback runs, then we're going to be in good shape. But we might still see a higher passing split compared to running split just simply because of the matchups, guys. It's all about the matchups. Now, should we not run the ball whatsoever? Absolutely not. Because if we decide to just pass, that will allow the linebackers to get into the pass rush game and also in the coverage game, and it's just not what we're going to want to see. So that's something to pay attention to. Now, as far as who Georgia Tech is as a team, expect them to have a physical run-first matchup, okay? This is the key here. Haynes King will be forced to throw the rock, and that isn't his strong suit. They want to run the ball. If we can stop the run, like I said, and stop the option and misdirection game, we're going to be in the driver's seat of this game, okay? We don't need to worry as much, okay? So, Georgia Tech may struggle to pass rush or produce explosively, but their run game and linebacker play will present challenges. Those come from my notes. Look for CU to exploit the edge rotation and mismatches versus a less experienced O-line, okay? So our defensive line, Jaheim Otis, Arden Walker, Keaton Wade, Samuel Okunlola, all of those guys, Amari McNeil, Torian Carter returning back. Those guys are going to be able to feast defensively and be important aspects to the game. Of course, our new linebackers are going to be very interesting to see how they stop the option game, because that's going to be who's going to be most important there. But if Georgia Tech is going to drop back and pass the ball, our edges are going to have to be able to get to the quarterback and get to the quarterback fast. So that's going to be there. Now, where Georgia Tech will excel this season, like I said, the run game, the run defense improved a lot, 30th nationally. They're bringing back great players, so that's going to be a really important aspect. And then offensively is the offensive creativity of Buster Faulkner, bringing his dynamic play calling, reverses trick plays, diversified spread option from the rumble seat. That is what Georgia Tech plays offensively, and it's what Colorado's going to have to look out for. The parts that they struggle: pass rush and secondary. So again, plays right into Colorado if they want to throw the rock. So can Caden Salter be a pass-first quarterback during this specific game? That's going to be the question, because they've got a completely new defensive coordinator in Blake Gideon, and he is inheriting a unit with only 4 returning defenders, which is mostly coming from the linebacking core that we talked about. And then consistency. Georgia Tech last year went 7-6. Okay, they're projected to be near 500 this year. Several forecasts having them under 500, with 6-6 kind of being the top part for them. Okay, they're going to struggle at times based on the competition that they're going to be playing in the ACC this upcoming season. The game against Colorado is just really going to come down. Can they be consistent, and can they win the battles during their weaknesses? Okay. Will the quarterback, Haynes King, be able to throw the ball? And if he does, then Colorado's going to be in trouble. Okay. Colorado's absolutely going to be in trouble. So that's something we got to pay attention to. TC ain't ready. He had bad in practice. That knee don't looking good. And the good news is, with our depth, we can take our time with TC if we need to. Okay. Torian Carter, guys. Torian Carter's TC. Rob, going to have to make tight windows for King to throw into. Yeah. So that's the big key. King is going to have to win on his arm. Absolutely. So overall, my summary of Georgia Tech: expect a stout, disciplined front with creative offensive wrinkles, but inconsistency and limited depth might cap their ceiling. Now, the key part there is the depth, guys. We've talked about this on prior streams, and I've had people argue and say that it's not going to be a big deal. The piece that I think is going to be the difference maker, especially when Georgia Tech does not have the depth, is going to be the fact that Colorado is playing at home. Colorado is in Boulder. It's the first week of the season. Georgia Tech is going to have to come in and play at altitude. That's going to be the difference maker when it really comes down to it, guys. So in the end, when all things are said and done, I am going to say that Colorado is going to beat Georgia Tech. on the opening weekend of the season to start 1-0. Okay? So, something to think about, something to understand as we go forward with that. Okay? So, let's see what else you guys got. They ain't even got pads on yet. How does anybody look bad in practice? I think it's more about the injury is what they're talking about. Northside, did they do a secret practice I missed? I think they were talking about spring. We'll have to see what happens this summer. Haven't practiced in months. They've been doing stuff. They had a player-led practice during workouts a couple times. Watch him run. It's lump to his right motion. Okay, we're going to move on to the next one. This one is a controversial one because I've already been hearing a few people predicting that Delaware is going to get the win, but the Delaware Fighting Blue Hens come into Colorado. It's their first year in FBS. They've made the jump from the FCS September 6th at Folsom Field. So here's what you need to know about Delaware. Delaware. Why don't I say that? Here's what you have to hear about Delaware. So key departures and what they brought to their team. Defensive end Premont Aston, a CAA standout in 2024, consistently pressured the quarterback for Delaware, no longer with them. Running back Nick Webb was their leading rusher, key red zone back. He is no longer with the program. And then top wide receivers and all CAA contributors, Jake Thaw and Max Patterson, are also gone. They were Delaware's deep threat options. Now, as far as who Delaware brings in linebacker Gavin Moole, 2025 preseason all CSU. Wow, I can't speak right now, guys. 2025 preseason all USA conference selection, defensive leader for the team. And then safety, KT Saya, offensive lineman Anwar O'Neal, and their kicker Nick Reed, all CUSA standouts from last year, are returning, as well as JB Silver, their running back, 2024 second team CUSA back. Very versatile. He's more of their every down back, whereas Nick Webb led the team in rushing. However, he was more of their bigger back used in the red zone. So that's what you have to look for with Delaware. Now, a little bit about Delaware and their offensive styling. So their coach, Danny Rocco, he is a very methodical, pro-style offense who likes to play with a physical defense. Stabilizing presence as Delaware is transitioning to FBS. The fact that they're keeping their coach, who has been with the program for a long time, is really important to their success and transition to the FBS. So they have 8 preseason All-CUSA selections. So that's showing that they are ready to make that jump to FBS. Now the question is, can those guys perform at that next level? And their first ever FBS slate brings pressure, particular against their opposing Power 5 opposition, starting off with Colorado. Okay, so here's the outlook on what Delaware is going to look like this season. Expect Delaware to game plan heavily versus the FBS speed. They're going to have to get used to that and get up to speed very quickly, okay? But the biggest problem that Delaware has is their roster depth, okay? Watch for their red zone efficiency, defensive tackling. CU should be able to control the line of scrimmage. Okay, I don't care what anybody else says. Poundage, size. Colorado this year has an FBS Power 4 trench on both the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball, and that should make the biggest difference. If there ever was a game for Colorado to have a breakout running game, it would be against Delaware. This would be the start of us really seeing the offense transition from what it was last year to what it's going to be this year. Okay, guys? So just understand that. Now, a little bit more about them. They're being projected to end the season at 7-5 in Conference USA. So adjusting to FBS pretty nicely and potentially being bowl eligible when the season is said and done. Ryan Carty, okay? Ryan Carty Their offensive coordinator built a well-balanced unit coming off of 9-2 in FCS, now transitioned to FBS with core experience intact. Linebackers and offensive line, okay? Give them physical reliability when it comes to just transitioning. But the question is, can they move up and match the style of the FBS play at those positions? That's going to be a key part of this. Okay, so those are all things that need to kind of be looked at. Now, their weaknesses and what really have to watch for is, again, their depth remains at an FCS level. It's their first year coming up. They haven't had a full recruiting cycle. They haven't been a part of the full transfer portal after being in the FBS for a year. So that depth is just not going to be there compared to other teams such as the Buffs going into this season. And then the last part is, again, as predicted by CUSA analysts, Delaware ranks near the bottom of the conference when it comes to just their roster limitations that they have going on. So, in summary for you guys about Delaware, new FBS team with coaching stability, expect physicality and effort, but there should be a clear talent gap versus the Power Five. They have not done enough to address that going into next year, okay, or this year. So that's something to pay attention to. The question that we have to ask Colorado, will the speed and depth differences show up early, or will Delaware's discipline that got them a successful FCS program keep it tighter than most people expect, at which point Colorado could be on the upset alert? Overall, I believe that Colorado will come out victorious. I do not, however, believe it will be an absolute blowout like some people might think with a brand new FBS team. So that's something to think about when it goes to that. Now, let's hear what you guys have to say as far as Delaware goes and what's going on there. Okay. CU has some depth this year. Yep, we finally do. That's 3 years of recruiting. That's what it takes. Delaware will be in a similar position come 3 years from now. Just watch. Okay. Delaware has me a little scared. They shouldn't be a walk in the park. They're not going to make you feel warm and fuzzy and like this is an automatic victory, guys. Okay. Okay. Don't let Bit spook you about Delaware. We perform, we will be fine. Exactly. I definitely don't agree with what they said with us losing to Delaware. The fact is that Delaware does not have the depth, and they are coming to Boulder. The altitude, the change in speed, the change in size, them being a new team. If this was us playing Delaware in 3 years, I would be especially worried. I really would against this team right now and who we have. But for now, I'm going to say I'm not. I do think Colorado will be victorious. I just don't think it's going to be a blowout like some people thought maybe was going to happen. We should go undefeated in non-conferences, Eric. I'm going to tell you what the surprise game, and some of you guys are already talking about it in the chat, that actually might be the most difficult on the schedule. Okay? Treat Delaware like NDSU and we'll be straight. Gualo, I love that. I absolutely love that. Should go undefeated doesn't mean it will happen. Absolutely. Hey, here's the key, guys. Do not crash out if Colorado does not go undefeated during this part of the season. Just saying. Do not go do not crash out if that's what happens. Yep, we'll get to these here in a second. Colorado should dominate both Delaware and Wyoming. Wyoming now has Coach Flea, but won't help the talent gap. I'm just so excited to watch football, Julius. Trust me. Trust me, I am. I like Delaware. Going to be pump up to prove they belong. Yep, they're going to. With the attention that Colorado gets, you will always get the other team's best. Okay? You really, really will. There are not going to be very many blowouts when you're Coach Prime in Colorado because you are going to get the other team's absolute best each and every week. And so Colorado needs to bring their best each and every week. Delaware going to be creative on offense. We'll get to this here in a sec. Okay, let's move on to Houston. Again, this one is in Houston. I'm not too worried about it being on the road at this point, But here is what Houston has going on for it. So we're playing Houston September 12th in Houston. The key departures and what they provided. They are losing their starting quarterback, DeJean Noel, air raid quarterback, led their passing attack last year. Offensive lineman Tigondre Sweat, he anchored their offensive line last year. Wide receiver Matthew Golden was a 2023 starter with 38 receptions, 584 yards, and 7 touchdowns, who ended up declaring for the NFL draft. And finally, they lost some in the safety position or secondary position. Cornerback Jeremiah Wilson, and of course, AJ Halsey, the starting stud safety that we wanted to see come to Boulder. All Big 12 talents for both of them, no longer with the program. So the secondary is definitely hurting for Houston compared to last year. But as far as key returners slash newcomers, wide receivers Stephon Johnson, 32 catches for 402 yards. Mekhi Muse, 29 catches for 253 yards are returning. Transfer wide receiver Amari Thompson, 670 yards, 8 touchdowns at UAB. Harvey Broussard III, who went for 31 receptions, 486 yards, and 3 touchdowns at Louisiana. Add to the wide receiver room. So they lost a little bit there with Matthew Golden, but they also brought in a ton. Cornerbacks Latrell McCutcheon, senior, and several other transfers bolstered their secondary. Houston really loaded up in the transfer portal to try and replace players. The question is, are those players going to be as good or better than what they lost, or is it going to be a step back? At which point could Houston as a team take a step back? And then finally, outside of the one offensive lineman lost, they're bringing back 5 veteran transfers to shore up that weak protection that they lost last year. So similar to Colorado, they're not bringing back really anybody. They're starting a completely brand new offensive line using transfers. So then the question becomes, are they going to be like Colorado last year, where you brought in a whole new revamped offensive line and we didn't really see much of a difference, just a slight improvement? Or are they going to excel and be a much better offensive line overall? Those are all going to be things we have to think about when we see Houston play us. So outside of that, let's look at their coaching and play style. Okay, Coach Willie Fritz brings an aggressive transfer portal. Where have we seen this before? The question is, did anybody in the country talk about the coach bringing in a massive transfer portal class? I don't think so. So they rebuilt the offensive line, the receivers. They're looking for that passing attack this year with Houston, and that is what they brought to the table. Offensive coordinator is in his first year, but he is expected to enhance their already used air raid tempo. So again, secondary is going to be on watch. Linebacking crew is going to be on watch. And can our defensive line get to the quarterback? Okay. Defensive coordinator Austin Armstrong, known for aggressive edge pressure schemes. So this one's really going to come down to how well our offensive line communicates and meshes come week 3, when I'm sure that Austin Armstrong is going to be throwing a lot of complicated stunts at this offensive line to test how they are. And as we know from the last 2 years, when teams started throwing those exotic looks, that's when Colorado's offensive line truly struggled overall. Some headlines to pay attention to as Houston goes into the season. Secondary, almost entirely new. Depth chart filled with portal additions. The offense should explode with enhanced line play and dynamic wide receiver group if they succeed. Okay. And then, of course, the big one, which has already been talked about. Quarterback Connor Wegman ranks 51st in the preseason and expects a good season overall. Houston finally getting that really good quarterback to be brought in. And it's going to be interesting to see how Connor Wegman transitions to Houston and whether he brings his past success to the program. So right now, Houston is projecting to be a high-scoring raid offense. But secondary testimonials will be tested by Colorado quarterback and playmakers. Look for explosive plays on both sides of the ball, especially deep passes and wide receiver mismatches on both sides of the ball. Right now, Houston is projected to end the season roughly around 7-5, 8-4, and should be bowl eligible when things are said and done. Again, looking at the strengths and weaknesses of the team, complete offensive line rebuild. Okay, so we'll have to see. Is that going to be a strength or a weakness? Receiving core, strength or weakness, completely overhauled. And of course, that aggressive defensive scheme should be a strength as long as Houston can get to the quarterback. Weaknesses completely is going to be on that secondary for Houston. They lost a ton. The question is, did the players that they brought in, were they good enough to be the replacements that Houston's going to need to kind of continue on what they did last year? And then the biggest question, which probably won't be a question, but it is going to be quarterback. Does Connor Wegman come in and solidify the quarterback position for Houston? We'll find out in the first couple of weeks of the season, but it'll be interesting to see where Houston sits going into this game and what Connor Wegman's been able to do with his first couple of weeks. So that's going to be something to really pay attention to. So the questions that need to be answered during this game: high scoring shootout potential if Wegman ignites and becomes the quarterback he can be. And the defense might struggle against Colorado's balanced attack if we bring that balanced attack to this game. So that's going to be the Houston preview. Let's see what you guys have to talk about and what's going on. Houston has a very good tight end, running back, safety, and one defensive end. Interestingly, only Coach Prime gets criticized. That's absolutely. Houston gonna be throwing that ball. Yeah, it's gonna be an air raid game from both sides, guys. Just watch. Do not let Connor Wigman and Haynes King scare you. Sincerely, an A&M fan. I appreciate that, Jordan Smith. Thank you for tuning in, Jordan. I always love fans from other Big 12 or other teams. Sorry, SEC now. Yeah. Appreciate you coming in. Let K. Salter cook. I appreciate that. Houston O-line is suspect. They're not all that hot. We don't really know because they're completely brand new. They absolutely could be dog water, and this could be the blowout of the non-conference games if that offensive line is not up to snuff. If Connor Wegman is not able to live up to the quote-unquote hype surrounded with his addition, that's going to be a very interesting thing to pay attention to as we go into this, okay? As we go into this. I could see 27-35 CU win. I could see 14-24 Houston win. Okay, very interesting. Houston finally has a quarterback, so it'll be interesting. Anything else on Houston? Houston's a sleeper and unknown. They had flashes, but they're almost an entirely new team. Eric, that's the hard part. That's absolutely the hard part there. Okay, let's get to my game of the non-conference schedule. Yes, my game of the non-conference schedule. And actually, guys, I'm going to call it right now. I'm calling it right now. You know, some people calling out Delaware. I'm calling out the Wyoming game. And I will get to the reasoning for why I believe the Wyoming game may be Colorado's toughest non-conference game to start the season. Okay, so September 20th, Colorado will be heading up to Laramie, Wyoming to take on the Wyoming Cowboys. Of course, Mountain West, we're going to be saying hello to old friend and coach Flea, who joined Wyoming on their staff as their running backs coach. So here's a little bit about Wyoming and what they have going on. Of course, they graduated quarterback Andrew Peasley. He handled their dual threat duties. So a lot of these teams in the Mountain West in that area like to do dual quarterbacks. You have one that's more of the running threat and one that's more of the passing threat, but Andrew Peasley is gone. And running back Titus Swen, along with multiple wide receivers and linemen, did end up exiting via the NFL draft and the portal. So they lost quite a bit, but that's not the problem. That's not why this game is going to be difficult. Okay. They bring back tight end John Michael Gillenborg, who anchored their receiving core with 31 catches, 437 yards, 3 touchdowns. Okay. Tight end is going to be a potential problem if our linebackers cannot match up or if the safeties are not ready. The question is, can a Tafik Bayard or a Carter Stoutmeyer cover tight ends this season? That's going to be an interesting thing overall for Colorado. Defensive end, Tice Westland, senior standout edge defender. He's going to be somebody we have to stop on the defensive line. And then the rest of it, you got center Jack Walsh returning, quarterback Caden Anderson, who will be most likely the starter guaranteed, and linebacker Braden Johnson, all returning for Wyoming. And then Wyoming added, by the way, guys, 40 transfers in the offseason in their 2025 class. So they have a lot of question marks that they have got to have answered, especially in the first 3 weeks of the season, which we'll know better once we get closer to that game. So that's something to keep tabs on. Now, here's a little bit about Wyoming, who, by the way, is coached by the great Jay Sawvell. Anybody know who that is? Anybody? Bueller? Are we? Wyoming is coming to Colorado. Is all 4 non-conference at home, or just the Houston on the road? Did I mix that up on the schedule? Oh, yeah, you're right. That is at Colorado. I don't know why when I did that first search, it brought that up. Wyoming always have one good receiver. Wyoming will lose at Colorado. Yep. Okay. I guess my initial Google search brought up the wrong thing on the schedule. No clue why that happened. Let's double check real quick. Yep. Folsom, Houston. Folsom, you're right. We're in Boulder. Okay. So, a little bit interesting there. But here's why I'm going to say that this is going to be a much more difficult game, even in Boulder. Okay. Even in Boulder. But again, Coach Sawvell, anybody know who Coach Sawvell is and why he is important to this matchup? Anybody? Bueller? I'm going to let you know on this in just a moment, because I think it doesn't matter either way for a specific reason. And Turbo, let me know if you know why I think that. Okay. Let me know if you understand why I might be thinking that. Okay. So Coach Jay Sawvell used to be the coach at North Dakota State. He was their longtime coach during their absolute amazing years, came in to Wyoming, brought that same North Dakota team, that same style. That is Jay Sawvell. He's in his second year at Wyoming, okay, guys? So it's changed. He's changed everything to a 4-3 defense, multiple offense, to being more balanced, tempo, flexible system. That's who Jay Sawvell is. The offense continues run heavy tempo with power elements. Defense prioritizes adaptability. Now you know why they ran the 2 quarterback system, similar to what was being ran at North Dakota State. That started with Jay Sawvell. So again, this matchup is going to be very similar to North Dakota State. Now, a little bit to know about the headlines of what people are saying going into the season for Wyoming that I've collected. Okay, Sports Illustrated talking about a massive roster revamp for them after only going 3-9, and a very high recruiting ranking for a Wyoming team. Okay, so that is something to pay attention to. Gillenborg, the tight end I talked about, he is being listed as a draftable player in the 2026 NFL draft. That's going to be very important matchup right there. And then the media really views the quarterback situation as stable going into camp. So they don't have any questions at quarterback, really. Okay. So expect that the Wyoming team is going to come into Boulder determined, rebuilt, to challenge early as an underdog against CU. Gillenborg is going to be their main threat. Deeper scrutiny on line play and whether or not the quarterback consistency will continue. Now, the question is the altitude. Now, you may be wondering to yourself, what do you mean the altitude? Shouldn't that be a benefit to Colorado? No, not in this game, people. Laramie, Wyoming sits at 7,165 feet, almost 2,000 feet higher then Boulder, Colorado. So where Wyoming will be coming down from altitude to that game. So the altitude effect that a home game for Colorado has is going to go out the window. It's going out the window. So there is no altitude is going to help one team or another. This is two high altitude teams facing off with one another. I bet you guys didn't realize that. I bet you a lot of people didn't realize that because they think Wyoming, they think flat. But Laramie, Wyoming, 7,165 feet. Something to pay attention to. Okay. Now, I know you guys have all said this. A lot of you guys have been talking about Wyoming is tricky. I have a family member playing for Wyoming as safety. Wyoming has a history of beating good teams in the past. Wyoming beat Texas Tech a few years ago. Wyoming has a good chance to beat CU. Don't sleep on them. Absolutely. Okay. I know little nothing says Turbo. Yeah, I did some research on Wyoming, and their altitude is higher than Colorado. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that. Laramie is up there, guys. Laramie is really up there. So Wyoming actually does have an altitude advantage over a lot of teams that they end up playing in Wyoming. It's why you see the Power 4 teams that go into Wyoming can struggle at times. So coming down to Colorado, I don't think it's going to be as big of a home field advantage for Wyoming unless we can absolutely blow it away noise-wise. But there's probably going to be a good contingent of Wyoming fans traveling with the distance between Boulder and Laramie. So that's going to be something to pay attention to. Now, as far as the projections go for Wyoming this year, they are projected to go 5-6, 3-4 in the Mountain West. Their strengths are going to be that quarterback tight end duo. Okay, so similar to like what Colorado State brought when they had Holker and of course their quarterback play. That was a question for that game, and they had a good game. Holker had a very good game against Colorado. So can a Carter Stoutmeyer or a Tafik Buyer cover the tight end? Their front seven defense is going to be very good. Okay, middle territory dominance from my notes from defensive end Tice Westland and an experienced defensive line overall. Now, where they lack of receiver depth and portal drain on their secondary as well. So that's going to help Colorado out overall. So again, it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out on the field and what that brings to Colorado. Okay. So they're coming off a 3-9 record, very low scoring team. Okay. And then multiple positions are being rebuilt right now, but very low scoring teams. So they're going to want to hold Colorado in check. If Colorado can open up the game, that's going to benefit Colorado. But think about North Dakota State last year. It is going to be a very similar game to that. Now, the question is Wyoming's quarterback as good as North Dakota State's quarterback was against us last year? Because as everybody knows who's been a watcher of this channel for a long time, I still believe that the best quarterback that Colorado faced all of last year was North Dakota State's quarterback. I truly, truly do. He had one of the best performances against us, absolutely had an amazing season leading North Dakota State to the national championship last year. So something like that happens again, Colorado could be in trouble. We talked about it before North Dakota State last year. I said it's going to be a low-scoring game. North Dakota State's going to want to run the ball. You got to put them in a position where they throw the ball to beat you. And unfortunately, North Dakota State passed the ball quite well in that game against Colorado. And so that was why that game was a lot closer than I think a lot of people thought was going to be, and why North Dakota State was such a difficult game. This is the same exact thing, guys. The same exact thing. That Texas and Wyoming game, 10-13 for like 3 quarters. Exactly. And then it blew up. But that's what Colorado's got to look for, and that's what needs to happen against Wyoming. Okay. Overall, I still think I'm going to give the nod to Colorado. I am not trying to be a homer here when it comes to the record. I just like the non-conference schedule, how it plays out. I would feel a lot different about the Georgia Tech game if it was in Georgia Tech. If it was in Georgia Tech, I say Colorado loses. Otherwise, I really do think it's going to be a close, tight, fought game. that I give the nudge to Colorado simply because it's in Boulder. Okay. That's where I think the difference maker is going to be. Delaware, I do think Colorado wins. I don't think it's a full blowout, but I also don't think it's going to be like a one score or like 1 point game that comes down to the end of the game. Houston, I think is going to be a very high scoring game with Colorado just eking out the win. And then Wyoming, I think it's going to be low scoring to start, but I think Colorado pulls away in the second half and comes away victorious with a bigger victory. So that's where I'm at with our four non-conference games, guys. Again, throughout the week, we're going to cover the rest of the first half of the schedule Wednesday, second half of the schedule on Friday. We're not done just yet because I'm going to dive into the chat here, but I wanted to let you know what the schedule is going to look like the rest of the week as we dive into football season, because next week is fall camp, baby. We're back. The Buffs are back. We're going to get more information about the team, about what's going on with Coach Prime, about what's happening with the players. That'll all happen next week. We're almost there. I think Rob going to be good because CU will face 3 schools that runs similar like Wyoming. That makes sense. K-Salt's Michael Vick 2.0. Wyoming won't have an answer for him. If any game is going to be Caden Salters coming out, I have it being Houston, but I think that'll transition well into the Wyoming game as well. Hopefully, Tariqus Davis can give us some insight on Wyoming's defense. I think Tariqus is going to have a good season, guys. I really do. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people. And I think, not saying he's going to be a perfect replacement for Colton Hood, I think that Tariqus is going to make us not necessarily miss Colton Hood as much as we might have thought. Okay. That's what I think is going to happen overall. So, any other comments? Let me know right now in the chat. Type them up. Any questions you have for me before we go for the day? Again, hey, while you're here, hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel, okay? We had a big jump in subscribers last week, adding about 20. I'd like to see that number continue on the road to 10,000 subscribers. We've kind of been stalled out for a little while once we hit the 5,000 mark this offseason. So I'm hoping to get to 10,000 by the end of the actual football season, but we'll see what happens. Are you still doing on projected starter videos? Yes, we will, but we need to actually see practice, Turbo. That'll be part of our preseason coverage leading up to that very first game. You think we get the defensive tackle from Colorado? Ty, we talked about at the very beginning of the stream. I think it's down to us, Washington, and UCLA. I think the tough part is going to be Washington because I do think that he likes what they bring. I think he fits their style. I think he could end up there. But I really would love Colorado to seal the deal with him. Absolutely. Rob, my biggest concern is us being disciplined on the offensive line, avoiding those false starts, trying to level those penalties down. It's going to be that way every year, Rob. It really is. Coach Prime talks about that each and every year. Penalties will kill a good team. And so I would agree with that. Let's see how the season starts. Let's see if we can be disciplined and keep the penalties down for once in our life. Okay? I think part of that is what happens when you bring in a new offensive line every year. The communication is not always going to be there, but I'm hoping that a second-year Jordan Seaton can kind of lead the way for that group. So I'm hoping that that's what happens there. What do you think the offense is going to look like this season? I think we are going to be more balanced, guys. I truly do. I don't think you bring in a Marshall Faulk to not run the ball. I don't think you bring in the offensive lineman, especially Xavier Hill, unless you're going to run the ball. I don't think you bring in Caden Salter unless you're going to run the ball. And by that, I mean quarterback runs. I mean running the option, the triple option, sweeps, all of that stuff, guys. I truly do think we will run the ball more. I think we will be a more balanced offense overall, and we're going to find that out in the first couple of weeks. Do not judge the offense on week 1, guys. Okay? Georgia Tech's strength is their run defense. Just remember that as we go into that game. Any word on King Joseph Edwards? I have heard nothing about the kid. So I have no idea what he's doing, where he's visiting, what's going on with that, what happened specifically. And so, that's kind of just where we're at. I don't know what's going to happen with him. Okay. I really, really don't. So that's something to think about as we move forward. Okay. Um, so we just don't know what's going to happen with him. We really don't. So keep an eye on that. See if there's word about it, whether or not, maybe Colorado's a potential spot for him, but I've heard absolutely nothing since he's left. Okay. Do you want to see a 2-quarterback system? I don't. I don't want to see the traditional 2-quarterback system where you alternate, depending on the down, the distance, what's going on in the game, who's the hot hand, all of that. I really, really, really don't. So I hope not. Appreciate you, Turbo. Thank you so much for that. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for joining me today, for being a part of the stream, for helping me along on this journey. I appreciate you guys. The best thing you can do, like I said, subscribe, like the video. If you want to become a member, it's $2 a month. $5 a month, by the way, will get you access during the season to the all 22 footage for Colorado, both on offense and defense after the game. So if you want to become a member of the channel, you can do that on YouTube. Shout out to my 2 members right now, D-Nice and David Talks Buffs, as always. So appreciate you guys so much for joining us. Grizz, the call-in show will start on August 18th and be every Monday during the season, 4 o'clock, unless I otherwise say so. But August 18th, put it on your calendar. I can't wait. Hope to have you guys there. Hope to hear from you guys verbally as you guys call into the show. We'll do our best. It'll be the first time doing it. I've been doing some tests. It works. But the question will just be what it looks like, with guys calling in multiple times, and whether I won't really have call waiting. And so it won't be fully like a radio show, but we'll do our best. Hopefully it works out. It's a lot of fun. I'll see you guys then. So appreciate you guys so much. So thank you guys for joining us today. You guys have been awesome. As always, for Buffs News Weekly Live, I'm your host, Russ. Sco Buffs. We'll see you next time.